know the vibes. Welcome back to another episode of the Hoop Genius podcast. Something slightly different today. Usually we have our weekly guest on a Monday, but we've had to reschedule things because, we've got a few things happening this weekend. So we've got the honor of Mr. Scott Perry joining us on a Thursday.
Yes.
Scott, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing good. I'm not at the parking lot on Thursday. I have to say the parking lot till Monday.
Oh, man, that's weekend work. You know what I'm saying? Get those shots up over the weekend, Get the range ready for the Monday. And BJ Armstrong, as always, is here with us. BJ, how are you doing, sir?
Fabulous. Real name, no gimmicks. So let's get right into it, gentlemen. Let's get right to it.
We're doing something new. We're going to answer some of your questions. A lot of you guys submitted your questions, and a few of you wanted your questions answered by Scott. So I thought, let's draft him in for an early episode. The first one, real quick to get us going. If you were playing today, this question is from Stone J666. If you were playing today, which current roster would you most like to be on? BJ, let's start with you.
Oh, if I was playing today?
Yes.
Currently today, I would want to be on San Antonio, the Spurs.
Because of Wemby.
Yes. I that's the roster. That's the player. That's the potential. So that's where I would want to play today. If it was right here, right now, ship me down to the Alamo.
Okay. Even though they don't play there anymore. What about you, Scott?
I'm going to be consistent. I'm going with the Miami Heat. Love how they play, how they've been. They've played this way ever since I've been in the league. They're tough. They play together. They defend. Had the best coach in the NBA, in my opinion. And it's not too bad when you can leave practice and it's 75, 80 degrees outside as well, too. So
yeah. I'm
going with the Miami Heat.
I'm not mad at that. You can be in the weight room all day long. I would play for the Lakers if I played in the NBA right now.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because I'm way too out of shape to play 48 minutes in the NBA. So I would like to drag them down even further out of the playoff spots.
Okay.
The second part of that question is, if you could enter a 2-on-2 competition with any current NBA player as your partner, who would you pick?
Scott?
Yeah, okay.
Current players.
The current players.
For a 2-on-2 competition.
2-on-2 competition? I'm going to have to go with my man Giannis in Milwaukee.
Solid.
Because he's so versatile, can defend. He can finish. He's going to be able to score. He's going to be tough to guard on the offensive end. He can help us get the key stop when we need it at 2-and-2. And he could use my help with being able to shoot that deep perimeter ball
from the halfway line. So Giannis is off the board. BJ, who are you picking?
Kawhi
Leonard.
Two-way
player.
Kawhi.
Get it cooking in the mid-range. That's good for the
Kawhi,
2-on-2s.
Hey. And as the great Rakim would say, I ain't no joke. We not laughing. We not laughing. We bought that action. So Kawhi would be my pick.
I like that one. I like it.
Well, my answer is dependent on whether or not there's a referee refereeing these 2-on-2 games. Because if there is, I'm going with Joel Embiid because he'll shoot 21 free throws and I'll sit back and relax while he does that. If he doesn't, who do I want to play with? I'm gonna have to go with a little bit of an answer that's out there a little bit.
Okay.
It's just a little bit out there. I'm gonna go with Steven Adams.
Okay.
Because I'm gonna miss a lot of shots, so I need someone who can offensive rebounds.
Okay.
And I'm not great at creating space, especially if an NBA player, if Kawhi Leonard's guarding me. I need someone who can set very solid screens. So that's my answer, a little bit different. Missy B wants to know, what's going on with Lonzo Ball? In cases like this, do players still get paid their full salary? Scott, from a front office perspective, when you've got injured guys on your roster, how does things work out with that? Do they still get their full contract, or are there some players have clauses in it? Is that a common thing in the NBA?
I believe he's still getting paid his full salary. I'm sure that every day he's in the facility trying to do something to rehab himself. And that's a tough, lonely journey for a player too, trying to get back on that court. I think that's not talked about enough. Lonzo Ball, I'm sure, would rather be playing basketball right now than being the subject of a, conversation of being injured all the time. So for the most part, unless there was a pre-existing clause, which I don't believe so, in this case, he will continue to get paid and continue to work his very best to get back on the court.
Hammy Tate wants to know, do you think OKC will make moves this summer? And who do you think would be a good fit to play alongside Shea and Chet? BJ, you said for a long time that you want to see a big man to play alongside Chet. And now our friend Bismack Biyombo is over there in OKC. What
we
a
talked that into
coincidence.
existence. We
What
talked
a
that into
coincidence.
existence, didn't we?
I've got no idea how that happened.
Hey, they've already got their big man.
So now
if
moving
they
forward,
win, I just want you guys to remind everyone that where this started. Just remind everyone.
oh man, I'm still waiting for when BJ starts telling me where his players are signing instead of Woj and Shams having all the excitement. But that's another conversation. Who do you think that they should add this summer though? If they now have their big in Bismack, what else do you think they need to add to that lineup?
Well, there are two things that are essential. There are a lot of things that we could talk about, but there are two things that are essential to every great team. There's talent, which clearly they have, but there's also toughness. And that just doesn't mean physical toughness. You have to have the mental toughness, and you had to have the toughness as a group to go out there and compete. So when you look at Chet Holmgren, Chet is a very skilled player. However, there's a certain level of physicality that you're going to have to play with, especially when you enter into the playoffs. So what I would like to see OKC do as they move forward is to begin to add the toughness that's going to be necessary as they begin to advance from round to round, because it's going to be needed, right? There's going to be a certain level of physicality that's going to be played on the perimeter. I think Shea, being a bigger guard, would be able to meet that challenge because of his size. However, when you look at their roster, especially with their front court, they're going to need a certain level to be able to play against the bigger, stronger, more physically gifted athletes that they're going to see as they begin to advance. So that would be one thing that I would try to address.
Any names that spring to mind?
Well, you got to look at the roster. I mean, you just have to look to see who's available. I mean, there are a lot of players that will meet this, but however, meeting that specific need for how they play, right? They play a fast game. With Shea being he's the straw that stirs that drink up there. So you're going to need a player who, to me, is going to be a unique type of player, because he's going to have to be a physical player in the interior, but also he's going to have to be able to shoot. When I say shoot, if he's going to play extended minutes with Shea and the other players because of the way that they play. So it's going to be fascinating to watch how this works. They're bringing in a player like Bismack Biyombo. I think this will be the first player that they brought in that probably doesn't meet that criteria of being able to shoot on the perimeter. However, the fact that they recognize they're going to need that level of physicality just says something to me that they're looking to advance, not just to get into the playoffs, but they're looking to advance and go and try to make a deep run in the playoffs.
Yes, aside from Josh Giddey, who can't shoot, but that's a whole nother conversation.
And BJ's talked all about it. Their playoff run this year will crystallize for them exactly who they need to go after.
Yes,
to go in, in the various series. So,
do you think, Scott, though, from a front office perspective, that they will make moves this summer, or do you think that they'll stand pat and keep going with what they've got? Because it looks like the moves they're trying to make at the trade deadline were just kind of around the margins.
I think the playoffs are the proving ground. So, dependent upon how their performance goes, I think will dictate how aggressively they move this offseason to add to that team. They may feel, after, depending upon what round they get knocked out and how they get knocked out, were they overwhelmed physically, like we talked about, this could be a possibility, or is it just something that needing more experience playing together, more game experience, and coming back together as a unit and not making any changes? They'll make that assessment as they go through the playoffs this year. So I wouldn't want to say right now going into it. So much will be revealed when this team plays in this postseason.
The UK Boston Celtics fan club want to know if you guys agree and think that Jason Tatum has the worst whistle out of any star in the league. Against Miami, he had 20 field goal attempts and only 2 free throws, and one was from an intentional foul. Which superstar has the worst whistle in the NBA in terms of getting calls from the refs? Because you know who's got the best whistle.
Who has the best whistle, Mo?
The man over there who has a mansion built at the free throw line where he resides, Mr. Joel Embiid.
Oh, Joel Embiid. Okay. Who has the worst whistle? That was a tough one for me. I don't know that I can just single out any player. I'd have to look at the sheer numbers on that in terms of free throw attempts. It appears when I've watched Anthony Edwards play this year, because he's a young emerging star, does he get all the calls he probably should get? Probably not. So I guess he would be my first one I would think about. And BJ can speak to this, but just historically watching the NBA, as a player ascends up the ladder, I think he gets more and more benefit of the doubt from officials and starts to get more and more calls when he attacks the rim aggressively and in those close situations. So that's why I tend to go with a younger emerging player like an Anthony Edwards right now.
Yeah, that's very, very true. However, for me, I think Tatum does have a horrendous whistle from the referees. I also think Nikola Jokic gets a horrendous whistle from the referees. BJ, who do you think has the worst whistle in the NBA right now in terms of not getting the calls that they deserve or calls that other players would get?
Well, I tend to look at the game from a holistic viewpoint, and you talk about Jason Tatum. Well, I firmly have, I don't want to say believe this, but I certainly come to understand that the people in those referee uniforms, they're human as well, and they read the newspapers and now the internet just like we do. And when I hear the coaches say they want to get up an excessive amount of threes, your reputation precedes you. It takes away from your ability to attack the basket and be that player that's going to initiate contact and take advantage of that style of play. I've come to understand that when you are a star player, you have to command how the game is going to be officiated. Are you going to attack the basket and demand that the referee makes a call, whether it's an offensive charge or a foul on me attacking the rim? When your coach comes out and starts advocating we have to shoot more threes, what do you can't have it both ways. Okay.
Right.
You can't be like, I want to shoot threes and I want to get a good whistle.
Well, so when they're shooting the threes, how they manufacture the threes is players driving to the hoop and then kicking out to 3-point shooters. And then players, when they get fouled on their drives and not getting the call, would be the issue here, more than just the black and white of shooting more threes.
So if you are refereeing a game, and you're certainly refereeing a game like we're currently seeing, where it's a 5-out offense. I think you and I discussed that earlier this week. Okay. When you play a game and the game is a physical game, meaning, Mo, you're going to touch bodies every time you're out there on the floor. When Mo cuts to the basket, Scott's job is to just touch Mo to make sure that, as we say on a championship team, they got to feel me tonight. That's the way the game is played. Now, if you want to play drive and kick, hey, man, that's a nice way to play. Hey, you drive, Mo, and then you kick it out. Are you driving the basket on a one-on-one situation? Well, if you're playing against a good team, Mo, everyone's going to fill in those gaps. So the drive and kick that you're talking about, yeah, that may work against bad teams, but that's not going to work against a championship caliber team or a team that you're going to see in the playoffs. So there's a certain level of physicality that's brought to this game. And when the referees see that the game is going to be played with a certain level of physicality, where Scott is saying, okay, when BJ goes off the screen, he's going to get this forearm and I'm going to push him around. Oh, that's the way the game is going to be played. That's why I love players who just adapt and adjust to the whistle. And the players will do that accordingly to how the game will be officiated. But you got to bring that energy to the game. So if driving kick is how you want the game to be officiated, and suddenly Scott and I say, nah, that's not how we play. That's not Detroit Piston basketball back in the day. That's not how.
I like how you added back in the day.
Well, it's currently not played today that way. But however, regardless of how other team played, good teams impose their will on the game. Every team that has won a championship in the NBA understands about imposing their will on the game, which is going to affect how the game is going to be officiated, which is going to affect how the game is going to be coached, which is going to affect how the players are going to play. We all know this. Scott says it all the time. Your proving ground is going to happen in the playoffs. If you want to know about your team, okay, just keep winning in the playoffs, because we're going to find out if you can meet that level of play. Because trust me on this, the referee's whistle, he's going to swallow that whistle later in the game. That's how that's now, if you can't, now I'm going to say this, great players know this. You got to learn how to play through the contact if you're going to be a great player.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, if you can't understand what I'm saying, then you probably are not a great player. You probably are looking for the whistle. But if you're going to be a great player, you are going to become an expert at playing through the contact, because you understand the difference between, looking for a whistle or making sure whatever needs to get done gets done. So that's my little 2 minutes on that.
I hear it. I also think Draymond Green gets a fantastic whistle because, like you said, he always plays with that physical nature. So the referees just come to expect that from him. So he gets away with a lot more than if other players did the same things, they'd be ejected instantly. So
we
stay in character. Stay in character. Is that right, Scott? Stay in character.
There's no question. Again, going back a little ways, but when we were in Detroit, we played physical every night. And if the referees were going to call every single thing, game might last 4 hours. So when ends up happening?
No, Scott, you'd have no players by the end of the first quarter because
exactly. Yeah. So you're right. So they adjust to how you're playing. And in the teams that you're playing against, they have to adjust. So there's and that's all you want as an organization, as a team, is a consistent whistle.
That's it.
If they're gonna call it touchy one night, okay, call it touchy both ways. Or if they're gonna allow extra physicality to go, allow extra physicality to go both ways. You just want consistency of whistle. That's it.
Well, speaking of Draymond, let me just ask you guys real quick. What's your take on this Draymond and Jusuf Nurkić feud that we have going on? Because obviously Draymond was suspended and forced to go to therapy after hitting Nurkić in the face, and then they played again the other night, and they had some words for each other, and then Draymond Green had like a 10-minute rant on his podcast roasting Jusuf Nurkić. I am of the opinion that we need some sort of ice hockey rules here, because I'm not really trying to see guys go on podcasts and gossip about each other and da-da-da-da. If you two don't like each other, all right, just have it out. Center court, 5 minutes, do what you got to do. But what's your take on it?
I don't really, for me, I've never really paid attention to a lot of that kind of stuff. It's a lot of noise. Let's just get back to playing basketball. I'll be honest with you. I mean, all of the back and forth. Let's play basketball. Let's let your play and what you do and what your team does speak for you. And after the other night, the Golden State Warriors got the better of the Phoenix Suns. They won the game.
Oh, that Steph Curry shot was unbelievable.
Yeah. And so, okay, Nurkić said what he said after the game. Draymond responded to it. In my opinion, all right, let's leave it there and let's move forward. All of the podcasts and stuff afterwards, going into and I didn't hear it, so I can't really speak to it.
You don't want to hear it. But
Yeah,
Draymond, leave the
exactly.
podcast into us. Leave the podcast
Okay,
into us,
that's
man. You just
exactly.
focus on getting into the playoffs. Come on, man.
Yes.
All right, here's one for you. CB Joycey wants to know, and this is a long question, so bear with me. BJ, you're going to love this one. You're going to love this from hearing the second word of this question. If Wembanyama is going to become the generational player we all think he's going to become, how does the Spurs front office proceed in terms of putting other stars with him? If a future Spurs title with Wemby is inevitable, do San Antonio go out to other organizations saying we want player X, or do the front office simply sit and wait to be contacted by players or agents wanting to join them in free agency, and they pick who they think is a good match? Asking from a front office perspective, as I have no idea how they normally operate around that sort of thing. So, Scott, let's start with you, as this is your area of expertise. Let's imagine you're in charge of the Spurs for a second. Are you aggressively on the phone lines trying to make deals for other players, or are you just letting Wemby do what he does and waiting for the free agents to come flock into San Antonio?
You always have to be assertive and aggressive. Those who hesitate a lot of times are lost, and so
that's for life, not just for being a GM.
Exactly. So the importance here is what you have in your building, currently playing with Victor Wembanyama. So which players are going to be there long term as part of the supporting cast to help not only him, but the organization, get back to a championship level. We've talked about this before. We really think that he needs a point guard in the building. And that's going to be, if I'm sitting there now, is really trying to identify who that is. If it's that player around the league, or are we even looking into the draft to find that player, given that Wembanyama is so young. So that would be my position right now, really trying to address that point guard position, and then and secondarily looking to add a little bit like what we talked about with the Oklahoma City Thunder, a little more physical presence on that roster, because if you're going to play against Victor Wembanyama, especially now as his body is still developing, you're going to try to be as physical as possible with him and his team to try to take them off their game. So I would be looking to add personnel that could help become initiators in that area instead of always being the team that's having to respond to it.
BJ, what's your take on it? As an agent, are you in a position where you have a player, hypothetically speaking, of course, that you think would be a good fit with Wemby? Are you calling the Spurs saying you should look at trying to make a move for my player, or we should look at this player in free agency? Is that, from an agent perspective, something that happens?
Well, when you look at the game, we put in categories. You're looking from an agent. Well, if I'm looking at it from an agent, I'm just looking at the business. Okay.
Yeah.
They have money in free agency. Where's the business? Okay.
So that's the team he likes.
Yes. So, the Spurs only have a minimum, Cleveland Cavaliers have a max. Well, I gotta do what's in the best interest of my client.
Okay, let me phrase that a bit better. Okay. I don't know if you can, but can you take us behind the curtain and let's say, for example, Bismack signing in OKC? Was that a case of you, in your conversations around the league, saying that you think Biz would be a good fit? Was that a case of OKC listening to the podcast and hearing what they need to put alongside Chet? Or did they just call you directly and say, would Biz be interested in coming over and playing with us?
Well, every situation is a unique situation. The Bismack situation was unique because he was already, financially, he was already had that taken care of with his last stop being there in Memphis. So he's basically looking for a different situation than what he would currently be doing if this was the only place that he had played this year. So every situation, every scenario is a different scenario. However, getting back to Wembanyama, the question is, what would we be looking to put with
as the front office? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. How aggressive, or would you sit back and wait? Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Well, if history serves me correctly, all of the bigs who've had incredible runs in this league, they've always had a guard to play with, right? Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, for instance, had Oscar Robertson and Magic Johnson. You had Shaq. Shaq played with Penny Hardaway. He played with Kobe Bryant. He played with Dwayne Wade. He played with Steve Nash. He played with LeBron James. Okay, okay. Are we catching on to how this works? Okay. Tony Parker played with Tim Duncan and all of these guys. So if you're going to have a superior frontline player, the first thing is you got to be able to take advantage of that player, okay, and be able to get him the ball in a timely fashion. So that to me is critical. Because of his height, I think he's got to be of a certain size. Why? Because as Wembanyama ages, he's not going to want to catch a bounce pass as he starts getting, he starts aging in this league, right? Playing with the big guy. I've had an opportunity to play with big guys. Bill Cartwright, for instance, I knew no matter what was going on, I could not throw him a bounce pass. Even if that was the only way I can get him the ball, I would just have to wait until he could see the ball and catch it and play as if I was over the top of the defense. So,
can you just explain for the fans why the older bigs don't want to bounce pass?
Well, because that's where they get hurt.
Yeah.
Okay. You got to take advantage of your advantage, right? You don't want a big guy playing little. You want a big guy playing big, right? Mm-hmm. So big guys are taught to turn around and play big. I didn't want to double team a big guy. Why? Because if he played big, I'm running right into his elbows, right? Mm-hmm. He'd hurt me. So there's advantages. I always tried to force guards to throw bounce pass to the bigs. Why? Because for two reasons. One, the slowest pass in the game is a bounce pass. That allowed us to have a defensive advantage. And now I could play in the game if a 7-footer was playing low. I always try to play to my advantages. I always try to make the other team play to the disadvantage. So Wembanyama, what's his advantage? Well, if you could throw it to him over the top, I don't know how many other people are up there. He's up there all by himself. So you want to make sure that you don't have a little guard, in my opinion, to be feeding this guy however you need to feed him. That's not to say that there isn't a guard who can figure that little equation out. But that would be my first thing. And then the second thing I would do is I want to take advantage of his versatility. I mean, this young man right now, just the other night, he had 9 block shots, Mo, or 10 block shots or something?
10 blocks.
10 block shots. Okay. Now, if he has 10 block shots, that means he's an elite shot blocker or rim protector. But that also means, and watching him, that he should be able to switch as well. And if you can put a team together where you take away this one aspect of the game, the ability for any team to run screen roll versus his group, I think it's virtually impossible to score in today's game. If you can just take away one aspect of the game. If we had to go into a game today and you couldn't run screen roll, what would you run then? Because no one's running offense. So the only only two things they run. They run isolation and they run screen roll.
Well, shout out to the Utah Jazz, though, because the Utah Jazz run some really nice offense with a lot of pin downs, a lot of other stuff going on for getting their guys looks. But
yes,
shout out to Will Hardy.
For the most part, when you watch the teams in the league, everyone's just running isolation or, screen roll. You don't have a play, you just screen roll. You don't have a play, you look for a mismatch and you do a little isolation. And hey, as you say, Mo, you spot up at the 3. Everyone's driving kick,
I'm ready.
Okay, so I think Wembanyama has a chance to be one of not just the great players, one of the greatest defensive players ever. If you can get a team where you can actually take away a significant set that is ran throughout the entire NBA. And that would be my goal with him.
Yeah, because even when they do run offense, the screen roll is the foundation of everything that they do.
If you play the Spurs, when you play the Spurs, you should say, I can't run screen roll versus his team because they're the same. When I say the same, they are athletic and big at every position.
And this
with
is
him.
also, when people talk about small ball, the Warriors had a huge advantage during their prime years because they had Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, Harrison Barnes, Sean Livingston, Andre Iguodala, all these guys who would come in and play the guard spots or the wing spots, and they could switch, especially when they went to Draymond at the 5, they could switch basically everything. Yeah. So you're right in what you're saying.
And when they added Kevin Durant, he fit in seamlessly.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
If you can switch everything, you're just at a huge advantage. But just going back to what Scott said, saying that you've got to be aggressive. One thing I read this morning that really made me laugh. Daryl Morey of the Philadelphia 76ers at the trade deadline called the Lakers asking if LeBron James was available, and then he called the Suns asking if Kevin Durant was available. And then the Suns said no, and he said, well, is Devin Booker available? Today we're recording this, it's Valentine's Day. So, fellas, this is your reminder to go shoot your shot because nothing is impossible. Go shoot your shot. I'm being Ice Spice's DMs tonight.
Exactly.
You know what?
Anyway.
Anyway.
Chris wants to know. If a team could tell they're going to be in the playoffs, how do they go about scouting for the draft? Do you ignore the players that are expected to go early if you don't have a pick in that range? I think, just from what I know, you would try and have a scout on every player because you have the ability to trade up in the draft. But Scott, personnel-wise, I want to know from a front office, how do you manage that? So you have your team of scouts. How do you divide up who they're going to go look at, what they're going to go look at, and whatnot?
Every draft, you got to go out and know the entire pool of candidates. That is your job as a scout, as a scouting department, not only to know their abilities, and we talked about this last week, we got to know who they are as people as well. That we'll prepare for the draft the same way. Because to your point, Mo, we may have the ability to move up, we may have the ability to move back, or we may decide after we've evaluated the entire draft that there's no one there really that can help our cause and we trade out of the draft. But you can't make any of those decisions without having complete and full comprehensive knowledge of who is in the upcoming draft. It's hugely important. So none of that changed for me. Now, in terms of me as a general manager going out to see players, if I was on a team that is going to have one of the best 5 records in the league, and I've assessed that, well, we probably can't get into the top 5. I still want to see the top 5 or 10 players anyway, but I would make sure that I got a chance to see guys 15 to 30, maybe more, more than once, because the likelihood of one of those guys being in our wheelhouse and the likelihood of us pretty much staying in that draft position, I wanted to be well-versed on those players.
Absolutely. The final question we have for today comes from AG. He says, do you believe in the NYC factor and how much of an advantage does that give to the Nets and the Knicks when recruiting players? Now, from the outside looking in, I think it's a disadvantage because not a lot of players want to step up to that pressure of the New York media. As we've seen over recent years, there's only been a couple that have willingly gone and said, I'm ready for the heat in the kitchen, so to speak. But BJ, let's start with you. Do you think that the New York teams have an advantage in recruiting players, or do you think the players are a little bit scared of the pressures that come along with that?
Well, it's a very complicated question, Mo. And I will say this, and I'm not speaking for all, but I think I have a pretty good understanding of this. Everyone talks about markability. New York has that, check. Everyone talks about growing their brand, right? Certainly New York has that, check. We all talk about playing in front of a sellout crowd and the greatest fans in the world. In my opinion, I don't know who the greatest is, but if you don't have New York in your top, then you're probably not an NBA fan. Check. Do you talk about enthusiasm, city, culture, everything that you're looking for you're going to find it in New York City. However, with that comes responsibility, and now we're getting somewhere. The New York fan base is going to do two things. They're going to hold you accountable, and you're going to be responsible, whether that's good, bad, or indifferent. If you play bad in New York, you're going to hear the boos. If you win in New York City, they're going to cheer like no one. I remember that year, Scott, I think the first time you guys had been in the playoffs in, what, I don't know, 10 years or so.
Right. Mm-hmm.
That was the greatest spectacle on television to watch that. I mean, it was incredible. And it was for a first round series.
First round matchup with the Hawks,
no
yeah.
question. With the Hawks.
It was hands down the greatest. And they started the day before. I mean, they're everywhere. New York. There's no. I mean, I may be biased. You can't tell me there's a better fan base as far as just rooting for their team. You know, I mean, they have it all. They got the stars, they got the fans, they got Brooklyn, the Bronx, Queens, Manhattan.
And you know what's a real good, I'm gonna let you finish your point. You know what's an underrated thing about the fan base? It's how it travels, because and you have so many New York people that live across the country. It was amazing going on road games, and sometimes you feel like you were playing at home.
It's unbelievable. No, so all right. So everyone says they want all of these things, but it's those two things. Do you want that responsibility that comes with that? Because them people, they not coming there, they not letting you slide talking about good try. They're not letting you slide with losing game one. They gonna let you know. Okay. And everybody is not built for New York City. Yeah. That's a fact. Okay. And I share that with my clients. Everyone talks to all this branding and all that stuff. New York City, it takes a very unique personality to deal with that. Okay. And we can have a whole podcast, and I would love to hear Scott. I know we're here today, but so the answer to that, you got to have a unique person that understands what they're getting into, because it's not like the other 29 teams in the NBA.
I'm just going to add one other point to it, what BJ's talking about with New York, because he's spot on so many things he said in terms of the advantages, from a marketing standpoint to the enthusiasm of the fan base. It's a multicultural place. I mean, look, it's the media capital of the world. So there's so much attention and all that goes to it. But no matter how much we know that, a player may know that and recognize it, they won't know what it's really like until they put that uniform on and run out that tunnel. We could tell them all of these things, and the guy would think, okay, that's what I want. I'm prepared for it. But until they run out that tunnel and keep doing it time and time again and see the different reactions, it is really hard to say. And a final point in terms of, you're talking about advantage, what has changed a little bit now from the time to say when BJ was playing, is social media. And this whole podcast was, how this has really shrunk the world, if you will. And we've seen players that have become, major stars outside of out of the New York market as well, too. So I think some players may look at that and may not want to take on all of the additional pressures that BJ and I are talking about right now and do it in another market and still become a star player. So fascinating discussion, fascinating question. And there is no...
And we have an expert who knows.
Exactly.
We just have to become better at what we do to bring it out of them, because trust me, Scott knows.
Yeah,
and he is an expert. He's lived it. He's been inside it. And let me tell you something. Here's New York and I'm gonna sum it up. I was young in my career, and I don't think they do it. They may still do it. They would do like poster night. The the first 10,000 fans that come in the building, they would get a Patrick Ewing poster, 7-foot poster. It was great.
Right. They had
And
the
I'll never forget.
bobbleheads now, I believe.
Yeah, they got bobbleheads. They got
Heads
all the
now.
things.
Yeah, right.
And I'll never forget this. It was on poster night in New York, and we're playing, and we beat the Knicks. And the fan base threw the posters on the floor during the game. And I thought, I felt bad, and I wasn't even a New York Knicks player. I was like, that's just cold. But you know what?
Yeah.
Pat Ewing, the next game, came off and had 40, and they started cheering. But that's the New York fan base.
I respect
in a
it.
nutshell. And I respect it too. And it takes a certain personality to be able to deal with that.
And to BJ's point, I'm sure when they went in there and played as visitors, and all the organizations I was with prior to working with the Knicks, when your players go into the Garden, they are locked in.
Oh, yes.
People are talking about, okay. I don't care if they went out the night before, whatever the case may be. It is a stage for those visiting players, and you're going to get their best shot, guaranteed.
Yes.
And that takes some getting used to as well.
Yeah, that's right.
Even when you're not a good, that's the crazy. Even when you're not a good team,
it's New York.
It's still New York. You're still gonna get the best shot from that opposing team coming in there. So you got to be locked in every single home game.
This is a podcast. I'm just throwing it out there. We got to bring this out of Scott. Hey, we got to get
we don't have enough time. I know we have a hard stop today, but we will.
We're going to revisit this. When free agency opens this summer, we're going to revisit this. Don't worry, BJ. Exactly. Don't worry. But appreciate everyone who's sending their questions. If you want to have your question answered on the show, feel free to join our Discord server. It's linked in the description below this podcast, so you can get in there, talk to some other basketball fans, and also we will answer the questions that you ask. Scott, BJ, appreciate your time. I know you guys got to run, and have a great weekend. Enjoy the All-Star festivities. BJ, I'll see you very soon. Scott, enjoy relaxing. And until next time, get buckets.